I expect I'll get massively downvoted for this one, as Godot has a highly engaged and fiercely loyal following. Godot has a lot of good things going for it, including that it's open source and it's very user-friendly, but I think it's important that people are aware of its limitations. So let's do this! Whenever I mention online about the fact that my game, Rover Quest, is using Godot 3 engine and not the Godot 4, people ask why I'm not using the latest version. Every time they do that, I'm forced to question the decision myself. Maybe these people have experience of releasing 3D mobile games and know better than I do. Like in this Reddit post where someone says, is there any reason to think that 3.x is more efficient than 4.x? When I started this game, Godot 4 wasn't out. It was still in development and not production ready, so it was the only choice. Then sometime in 2023, Godot 4 was officially launched. Since then, it's had wide adoption and there's very few of us left still using version 3, from what I can gather. In my last devlog, I showed the beginning of porting Rover Quest to Godot 4. It was a lot of work, but I got it to a stage where it was basically working but looked a bit rough. Since then, I carried on working on it and got it looking semi-decent. It's not too different from the Godot 3 version now in most places. I fixed some of the weird facial features of the NPCs that you may have seen in the last devlog by undoing the Make Resources Unique option of the models in the scene editor. That stores some of the exported 3D models local to the scene instead of using the Blender export file. This is so that each instance can have unique materials assigned. Otherwise, when you make a change to one NPC, like changing the colour of the clothes, the change happens to all of them. I had to undo the Make Resources Unique by manually hacking the .tscn file in Notepad, as I couldn't find a way of undoing that in the editor. But it was no big deal to do that, as long as it works. The information is obviously not fully compatible between the engine versions. Once undone, I could then reapply the Make Resources Unique, and it all worked. I was happy to see all the friendly NPCs look back to normal again. To celebrate my progress, I thought I'd run it on my Android phone to see how it compares. Since it's a mobile-only game, it's pretty important to see how it runs early on. My main phone is a Google Pixel 8 Pro now. The Godot 3 version of Rover Quest, which is the one currently on Google Play and Apple App Store, runs really well on that at a smooth 120 frames per second. To my surprise, the performance of the game running on Godot 4 was absolutely horrendous. It ran anywhere from 14 to 40 frames per second most of the time. Unfortunately, I can't show that in a video capture as, for some reason, my Pixel phone boosts the frame rate to 50 or 60 FPS when screen recording. It seems to allow the processor free rein to hammer the life out of the phone to overcome the processing overhead of recording. You can see the frame rate in this debug profiler page though. There's no screen recording going on here. It's just running normally and you can see how bad the frame rate is. I don't think it's acceptable to ask people to run my game with screen recording on, so I need to figure out why it's so slow. Looking at the profiler, nothing specifically is jumping out at me, except for the physics seems to be using a lot of resources. It's quite surprising as there's not really a whole lot going on there, I thought. Everything not in the vicinity of the player just gets temporarily removed from the scene, so it's only stuff nearby that's in play and using memory. I've got it set to use Jolt physics in the project properties here. I thought Jolt was supposed to perform the best, as it's a dedicated physics library used outside of Godot and is supposed to be shit hot. I switched to the default physics, which is Godot's own implementation, and to my surprise, found that it did perform a lot better. You can see it running here side by side, Godot physics on the left and Jolt on the right. The frame rate is still struggling at between 40 and 60 frames per second when playing. It's better, but not great, is it? Bear in mind that this phone was the flagship Google device only last year. If it can't run well on that, what can it run on? If I compare it with Godot 3 on the left now, and Godot 4 on the right, Godot 3 is running at a pretty constant 120 frames per second, while 4 is struggling getting to 60. It really shows in the gameplay too. Memory usage on Godot 4 is much higher. It's using hundreds of megabytes more than Godot 3. This is the same area of the gameplay, so you'd think they'd be pretty similar. Anyone else experiencing bad performance on mobile? Most of the posts that question it on the Godot subreddit get horribly downvoted. There's this one here where the developers are getting 10 to 16 frames per second with a low poly 3D game. Maybe I should count myself lucky. I found this GitHub issue where they're saying performance on Android devices has decreased significantly recently. Looks like things are getting worse rather than better. Look at this issue still open in GitHub. Big problems on Android. There's a lot of incomprehensible problems that cannot be identified. This person has migrated his game from Godot 3 to 4 and is now experiencing a massive increase in crash rate in his Google Play console. When he's on Godot 3.5, he's getting 0% crash rate. Once on 4.3, he's up to 8%. This is really bad. Google sees crash rate this high as bad behaviour and it stops recommending your app if it continues. I feel for him. It's almost impossible to debug issues in these reports, and the problems are most likely in the engine anyway. I myself have had this warning where I'm getting close to bad behaviour at 4% due to Godot crashing on some Oppo phones, but that seems to have gone away now, for the time being anyway. If 3D games of a reasonable size perform this badly on Godot 4, then it's just not suitable for this type of game. Yes, it's probably fine for a very small 3D puzzle game or something, but not an open world first-person shooter or RPG, the kind of thing I'm interested in making. So what are my options? The game is working fine for now on Godot 3.6, but the problem is, I don't know how long that's going to be supported for. Also, the external libraries I'm using for adverts and in-app purchases, I don't know how long they'll be supported for. Already the AdMob library used for ads isn't being developed anymore. They've all moved on to Godot 4, but my guess is they're making small 2D games. I can either wait and pray for Godot 4 to improve with time, which I'm doubtful it will happen anytime soon, or move to a different engine. That's what I'm seriously considering doing. I know Unity can handle this type of game no problem, as there's so many of them out there made with it. I think I'd probably hate working in Unity coming from Godot, but I may have to try it. I do like the workflow in Godot, and I like GDScript. I find implementing new features really quick and easy with it. When it comes to Unity, I have a few years of C# under my belt from my day job, so I should be okay with the language, but I think it'll feel more like work. I do look forward to shipping compiled code rather than including source with the game, which is one downside of using a scripting language like GDScript. So, the takeaway from this video is, if you want to make 3D PC games, I think Godot is still a good choice and I would definitely recommend it. My game works great on Godot 4 on my laptop, but if you're serious about mobile, I just don't think it's there yet, and I can't see any serious effort to get it up to scratch. Anyway, that's my experience. If you've got any thoughts on the matter or have a different experience, let me know in the comments. What else have I been doing? Oh yes, I've had complaints from some people who don't like the touch button controls, so I'm in the process of implementing this virtual joypad. It's almost there and should be available really soon. I'll make it switchable so you can choose whichever method you prefer. I find the touch buttons easier, but there is the difficulty of pressing the fire button while manoeuvring, which has been pointed out to me before. It's always had actual real controller support, but most casual players don't use those. So, that's what I've been up to. Looks like I'm going to be diving into the world of Unity for a while and see how I get on with that. I have no idea how that's going to work out. It may be a complete fucking disaster, but if you'd like to find out, hit the subscribe button and I'll keep you posted. I'll continue to update the Godot 3 version regularly, but in the long term I need to find an alternative. I'll park the Godot 4 port. I can always come back to it if something changes in the future. But for now, that's all I have. You can download the current version with the Google Play and App Store links in the description, and keep an eye out for the virtual joypad update. Catch you in the next one!